Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. And today we are here with the fabulous Karina Blackhart, the Crone herself. All right. So Karina and I met in the Catalyst. Like,
Yes.
probably should have asked Maurice if she wanted to sponsor this, because this episode is brought to you by the Catalyst. You can find my affiliate link at briarharvey.com/catalyst. Truly, I have enjoyed getting to know you in this space, and I love your work. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here.
Well, that's an open-ended question. So I'm Karina Blackhart. Thanks for having me on, Briar. I'm super excited to be here. I love what you're doing with the Neurodiversity Media Network. I try to watch your podcasts, like whenever they come up, I'm like, oh, Briar's on. What are they talking about today? And like you said, we know each other from the Catalyst, Create the Rules, business Catalyst. My work these days is called The Crone Herself. You can find me at thecroneherself.com. And what I'm doing is bringing in, sort of embodying and moving through me, right? And working with the energy that's available in the world, what I'm calling big crone energy, which is, sort of a nod to big dick energy, right? But claiming it fully and saying, oh no, there's an alternative to that, right? So big crone energy is really about being your whole self, unapologetic, unmitigated, I want to say, without shrinking, without withdrawing, without holding back, just being who we really, really, really are. I find that having turned 58 this year, something shifted for me, right? Like, I knew it was coming because I was in the middle of my second Saturn return. If your audience doesn't know what a Saturn return is, it's an astrological.
Good luck, y'all.
It happens 27, from when you're 27 to 29-ish. And it really marks the beginning of real adulthood, right? That isn't to say that you're not an adult before that, but something shifts and we leave our childhood past and step into something new. It's a hard time, but it happens again, right? So we always hear about that one that happens when you're in your late 20s. People rarely talk about that it happens again in another 27 years.
Some of you might get a third Saturn return.
Some of us might get a third one, hopefully we're healthy for that and we can teach about that when it happens, right? So, 54 to 58 years old. And in traditional cultures, they would usually, have a ceremony for women becoming elders at around that same time, surprisingly. So shocking, right? That they knew these things. And we're having to relearn all of this, right? All of these ceremonies and rites of passage that we just don't have in our culture. So I was very excited to see what would happen, right? Because my first Saturn return was so impactful, right? You're sort of post-menopausal, maybe, by this age. You have your second Saturn return, and something happens in the lead up to this time of life. So, first of all, there's menopause, right? That is different for every woman, right? There's no panacea. There's no singular way to deal with it or treat it medically, right? We all have to make our own decisions about that. But honestly, we just don't have enough women talking about what it was like for us.
Not at all.
because these are like private things, right? Um, my mom in her generation, she was born in the 1920s, but she always called it the change, right?
I
The
remember.
yeah, the change of life or the big change, right? And certainly, so there's something physiological, hormonal happening in the body that's major as what happens when we are in our pre-adolescent and adolescent years in our as we go through puberty, and we're trying to figure out what all these hormones are, right? And this is sort of the other end of that, where your hormones are wacky, right? You don't have enough, you have too much, you're having hot flashes, you're having mood swings. um Here's the thing that I want to tell women, though, is that it ends.
Thank God. Because let me tell you, at the starting of premenopause right now with hot flashes, and I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to make it through this. I do not know how I'm going to do years and years of this. Please let me go get that HRT right now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I never did hormone replacement therapy. I did for a little while. I guess maybe I did something I was rubbing on my skin. It didn't seem to help me.
Progesterone cream,
Yeah,
probably.
it didn't help me. I was still having hot flashes. I was still out of my mind. Um, Anyway, it ends. It comes to an end. I still have a hot flash once in a while. I'm like, oof, like, oh, whew." But it's not as intense as it used to be, and it's not like right on top of each other. Like, it really catches me by surprise when I have one. But what I want to say is, like, that hormonal fluctuation that messes with our sleep, our mood, our emotional state, our tolerance for anything that is not right in our life, right? Um, that evens out. So I want to, like, hold out that hope, like, hang in there, right? So I've come through it, right? And I'm in
Right.
this new phase. I've come through menopause. My kids are grown. My hormones are even. This
Ah,
is
bless.
Our hormones are even, right? Like, we don't know what that's like, because the last time they were reliably even, we were children, right?
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
All
And
of the years of
so,
menstruation, we are different from week to week to week to week,
right.
right? It's not just every 28 days, that we're bleeding and we're having that happen, but there's I'm exhausted. I'm horny. I want to kill everyone. I'm bleeding, right? Oh, I
And
feel
actually,
better.
that's a pretty good descriptor of the changes your body goes through cyclically as you release progesterone before ovulation, and then it dips and your estrogen surges into menstruation. We
Yeah.
do not talk about this shit at all. It's all very hormonally cyclical. And it's
Yes.
even worse if you are neurodivergent or in other ways neurologically different,
Hmm.
because those hormones are more. There are more of them. They are deeply exaggerated and they affect your brain in different ways
Hmm.
than the neurotypical brain.
Yeah. So what I want, what I want you to really hear again is, like, that stops.
I, I truly
And
can't even imagine.
I, it's hard for me to even recognize, like, to be like, wait a minute, I'm the same. I'm the same today as I was last week, and I can rely that next week I will be the same again. And the week after that, I'll still be the same. That I will not be, that I'm not on this wild hormonal roller coaster ride where stuff is just happening that's so internal. And many women many people who bleed, we don't even recognize how different we are from week to week to week, right? We just think I'm a mess. And it's not. If you track it, it is cyclical, and you can start to know, this is what I can expect this week. This is what I can expect this week. This is what I can expect that week. And to honor those cycles, right? But there is this point where we're not undergoing that anymore, and we become hormonally, right, which means emotionally, which means physically, physiologically, mentally, spiritually, on all of these levels, we become reliable to ourselves.
So, I want to talk about the ways in which we culturally demonize this age and stage of womanhood,
Yeah,
because you would think that when women are now at their most emotionally stable, we would lean into and embrace. Here is this, I hesitate to use the word tribe because I dislike the associations, but here is this band of women. Karina calls them a conspiracy,
I
y'all.
do.
Here is
I
this
forget who said it, but someone
conspiracy
said
of
one
women.
day. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I'm
go ahead.
talking over you. I don't remember who said it, but it's a quote that I often see go by in social media where it says, one day an army of old women are going to take over the world. And I'm like, we're here. We're here. Like Gen X, I'm like the earliest, right? I'm like days after, I'm one of the first that that gets to call ourselves Gen X. And we're here, and it's coming because we are a different generation than the boomers were.
And unwilling to stay silent about the ways in which women of this age are culturally diminished and demonized. Yeah, let's talk about that, because I really feel like there's something here when it's the difference. Do you remember after the Super Bowl when Shakira and J-Lo did their whole thing, all of those memes floating around about the Golden Girls versus J-Lo and Shakira?
Yeah,
And I was like, this is because the Golden Girls are marvels, truly
iconic. Yeah,
iconic.
yeah,
It's not about how they look, it's about the ways in which we would prefer to continue to subject older women to the male gaze and diminish their ability to be whole people, whole ass fucking people
yes,
with real agency, because it takes some women till that second Saturn return to
yes,
discover that they have agency.
yes, yeah. And we employ ageism against ourselves,
Mm.
right? So many women fear losing our beauty, our youth. So many women hate to look in the mirror when they're our age. I have to tell you, I spent about 5 years where I didn't like let people take pictures of me. There's no way you would have gotten me on a video camera a year ago, right? Something shifted, and I'm like, this is who I am. This is what I look like. Like I'm I saw a little video or a meme this morning where the woman it's on my Facebook feed, and she said, I'm 50 years old. She said, why do I want to look like I'm 25?
Agreed.
I want to look like my age, whatever that means, right? And it looks different on different people, just like youth does, right? But this misogyny, right, coupled with the ageism is big. right? And the only way that I know to get over it is just to be like, I own me. And this is why there are such negative stereotypes about old women, because this happens to us all, right? When we're in our 40s, sometime in our 40s and early 50s, women get a case of the big fuck it's, right? Excuse me, am I allowed to say that online?
Oh,
Um,
yes, you are absolutely
so,
allowed to say
you
that
know,
in any space of
right.
mine.
So the whole thing of like, I have no more fucks to give, you're getting, you like, that was my last fuck, right? I mean, it's a warning, right? It's a warning of what's to come, because that continues, right? Maybe the edge of it, the sense of feeling like, ooh, look at how badass I'm becoming. Like, I don't have any fucks to give, right? And I'm going to even say that out loud. But it just becomes the norm. Like, I don't care if I don't care. I mean, I care about myself. And there are things that I certainly care about, right? It's not that we have no more fucks to give. I think it's that we know what we really do care about and where we are willing to expend the life force that we have left, the time and energy and effort and attention that we have, and we have less of it, right? When I hit 50, I realized, like, my mom died when she was 78, right? And I was like, wait a minute, they told me this was midlife. And again, it's another lie, right? Like, we don't live to be 100, most of us. And I thought, oh, this is like 2/3. And I thought, I better start living.
Nowhere do I see that with more clarity than the divorce rates of women in their 50s. Whether that's because the children have left
Yeah,
or
it's that.
because she's come home to herself.
Or he's having a midlife crisis and being a wacko,
Correct.
right? And she's like, I'm not,
I'm done.
I'm all done. Yeah. Um, but yes. And, now it's worth mentioning that, I work with women who are like, what am I going to do about this marriage? What am I going to do about this marriage? Um, and the answer is really like, we can complicate it, right? But it's like, either he's going to come along and grow up at this age in his life, and you're going to wait, and you may still be waiting in 20 more years, or you're going to leave, right? And we can go down all the little side roads and pathways, um, trying to avoid that decision, but that's really the decision, you know.
I
And a lot of women decide, like, uh, I've got a third of my life left, I want to go live it, I want to go be happy, I want to find out what it's like to not have to tell him to pick up his underwear every day.
I want to take up space, and I do not wish to shrink anymore in
Mhm.
my own home and life and world. And there's real power in that.
It's an incredibly powerful time. And I think it's important for me to say too that when I talk about big crone energy, right? I'm a big force, right? I have big thoughts. I have a lot of energy. I've spent my whole life doing personal work and being a teacher. So I have all of that, right? And I'm not telling people to be like me. Okay. I'm asking women, who are you? What is it that you've always wanted to do and you put it off because you were raising children, you were running the household, you were coddling your husband, you were paying the bills, you were going to work, and all the roles that we take. Maybe you always wanted to go get your bachelor's degree. Maybe you always wanted to write poetry or paint or garden or raise chickens, or maybe you wanted to do all of those things, right? This is a time in our life where we say, I'm doing it. Maybe you wanted to travel, right? Maybe you always wanted to sing on the stage, right? Whatever this energy is, this big crone energy, right? I don't want people to mistake that I'm telling everyone, like, you've got to be out there and vocal and you have to be, talking about the patriarchy. That's my job, right? That's what I do.
That's
I
what we're
want,
here for.
yeah,
Doing this work, being loud. That's not for everybody, and that's definitely not what we're asking. We're
no,
asking, how can you be loud in your own life?
right. And loud in your own life may be, I'm learning to make soup. I'm learning to cook Indian food. I'm learning to bake little tarts. I mean, I did all of these things during pandemic, right? Like, I look back at my memories that come up on my phone and I'm like, I am never ever making teeny tiny lemon tarts ever again. It's never
It was a wild time, right? Such a wild time.
I'm like, who is that? Like, so domesticated, right? And yet it was a part of me that I never had time to explore before, right? And now I think about, like, spending the day stirring lemon curd, and I'm like, that's not going to happen, you know. Um, we want to be our own best ally, right? Being a crone is fun, right? Because we can rely on ourselves, because we have a lifetime of experience. And I think all we need is permission, right? Sometimes we can give ourselves permission. Sometimes we need someone else to hold us accountable and give us permission. That's one of the things that I do as the crone herself. I also want to be sure to say that this energy that I'm talking about doesn't belong solely to chronological crones, right?
Mm.
That we have access to this all the time, right? And I often say that children are very close to the energy that we run, and they may even run it clearer, right? I want to say purer than we do, because they haven't taken on all of the cultural conditioning, right? All of the, what I call the good girl rule book indoctrination, right? They don't have that embedded in their cells yet. But if you think about children and old women, will tell you the truth.
When we look at the triple goddess
Yeah.
archetype,
Yeah.
right? It's maiden, mother, crone. Maiden is the cusp of womanhood, but
Yeah.
that archetype does not actually include early childhood. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of development. Again, especially when you are neurodivergent, your brain learns backwards. There's a lot of research
Mm.
about this, especially for autistic folks.
Mhm.
What we learn at 2 and 3 is not the same as what neurotypical children are learning and processing at 2 and 3. That is why
Mhm.
it takes till our mid 20s to really fully round out that brain development and
Mhm.
figure all these things out. So there is, I think, the ability to access that source, and we're closest to it at birth and at death, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I always want to talk about that child, because that's part of our development, right? It's just like when we talk about, you said the waxing full and waning moon. No one talks about the dark moon,
No one talks about
I
the
talk about
dark
the dark
room.
moon. Right? Like, what is happening in that space where the waning crescent and the waxing crescent, which is the girl, right? And the old woman. I love the idea that they are sitting in that dark moon space together,
Ooh, I love that.
sharing the secrets of the universe, right? One from being so close to have coming into being, and one so close to the end, right? And so in that space, I'm going to use like really gender essentialist language here. So, and I'm aware, right? um, in that space, that dark moon space, that dark energy, that womb space, that tomb space, right, is where these two meet and they share information and power and secrets, and plans, right? They make plans. Um, but I think that those two archetypes are much closer together. We tend to like always put things on a
Right,
spectrum,
the
right?
crescents are on the end, but a circle has no end.
Right, right. Um, so Big Crone energy is available to us no matter what age we are. It's energy, right? Can you be a crone when you're 30? No. Can you run crone energy when you're 30? Absolutely. Can you run it when you're 12? Yes. Teenagers run it all the time.
Oh, I can distinctly remember spaces and times in my life where I have tapped into that and done my thing with no regard or thought of anyone else but
Mhm.
what I needed in that moment. And that's what it is.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. There's
Okay.
a part of me that still wants to soften that, right?
No.
That still wants to soften it and say it's not about disregard for others' feelings or our impact on others. I think it's that our regard for ourselves and the impact on ourselves in a given situation is perhaps for the first time in our lives given equal weight.
So, what does it look like to have an army, a conspiracy of crones out in the world?
I think it means women who have life experience and who care deeply about the world that we're living in, right? Speaking up, standing up, um, and also being incredibly creative, right? I just read an article, I think I shared it with you, um, about research that they had done on the aging brain of women.
You did, and I
And
loved it.
and it was shocking, right? They were shocked. I was shocked to read it that we are not in decline. That this time in our lives, our brains are the most active. We are at the most creative. We are better at solving problems than we have ever been in our lives. This is like scientific research, right?
That
It's
we
crazy.
rarely do because we rarely study women biologically
Correct.
for medical purposes. We especially don't study older women.
Right.
So I, I, I'm shocked, y'all. The research clearly indicates that postmenopausal women use more of their brains than anyone else at any other time.
Yes.
A significant percentage more than anyone else at any other time. These are our
And that we
wisdom
can
keepers,
access both sides of the brain because
right?
that membrane that separates the left and the right brain softens, right? And becomes more permeable. And rather than that looking like brain damage, it looks like we can access both our creativity, our poetic, instinctual, intuitive nature at the same time that we can access our rational problem solving, intellectual part of our brain. So this is why we're creating art. This is why we're writing our first books. This is why we're trying to solve world problems. So, the conspiracy of Crohn's is, um I have a membership called the Conspiracy of Crohn's. You can sign up and pay a monthly fee. Right now it's, I think, $99 for the whole year because we're just getting things set up. So after May 1st, it'll be, I think, $15 a month. And it's a place where we can come together and talk to one another and know that you belong to this group of old women or women who are running this big crone energy, right? To to support us in being who we are, right? We still need affirmation, right? Like, no, that was okay. That was strong. That was powerful. You stood up for yourself. Because we still do have that deep, deep, deep conditioning of being a good girl, right? So the conspiracy is a place to be reminded continually that the good girl manual no longer applies. It doesn't apply to old women, and we need to do everything we can to teach younger women, that they need to burn that manual, right? We have so embodied the indoctrination of the culture that they don't even need to police us. We
Oh, we do it
police we
ourselves.
police ourselves, right? And I can only speak as a white woman, right? But part of the indoctrination of young girls into how to be a good girl and to follow the expectations is that we are also taught how to police other women,
Oh, yes.
right? And correct them for their own good, to be helpful, right? Um, so the conspiracy is a place to break all of that down and to keep coming back to for affirmation and, like, I need a reality check. you know I need a reality check. This is what happened, and I should have, could have, would have, might have. And to hear someone say, no, you're okay. You don't have to should have, would have, could have, might have. You're okay. There's this idea that we are broken, that we need, forever have to be working and working and working and working and working and working and working till we die, right? To be good. We came in good. We
Yeah, there's
are
some
good.
religious components here that
Yeah.
are unfortunate, I think. And I would note that women of crone age are frequently researching and finding new spiritual avenues that actually, I don't want to say prioritize them, but honor them as they are in the space that they are in.
Yeah. Yeah. We're tired of being told that we're bad, right? Or that we might get punished if we're not good enough. You know. So earlier you had asked about the negative stereotypes about old women. And even when I was just beginning, when Big Crone Energy and the Crone herself were like nascent ideas, and I was talking with a friend of mine who's 60, right? A few years older than me. And she said, I'm not a crone. You're like, we're not Crohn's. Like that's an old woman. That's like when you're 80. And I said, no, no, no. We are. We really are. Um, and there was a recoil, right? She recoiled from the word. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in honor of Mary Daly, who was a radical feminist theologian back in the 80s, second wave feminist, and um, she wrote a whole book called the Webster's New Intergalactic Wikidictionary of the English Language. She wrote an entire dictionary, sort of taking words apart and looking at these concepts and these stereotypes and how we insult. We have taken words of power that describe women and turned them into slurs and into insults. And so one of Mary Daly's life goals was to reclaim that language, and it's one of mine as well. I think that the name Crone is a title of honor, right? I want to reclaim all of those words: hag, nag, bag, biddy, bitch, all
And
of those.
there's so much. I'll get to hag, but the one that hits me the hardest is spinster. Because you know what a spinster was? It was
Yes,
a woman with independent income.
yes,
It was a woman who did not require anyone else to provide for her
yes.
because spinning was
Lucrative.
incredibly lucrative. The ability to make thread, the ability to make cloth, the ability to make clothes, and we have transformed that into such terrible nastiness.
But that woman would have been outside of patriarchal rule because
That's
she had
correct.
her own financial means, because she was probably a landholder as well, right? These are the women they burned in the witch
Yes, it
trials,
is.
was the women who fell outside of patriarchal rule because they were either um, critical of it, right? Didn't know their place, wouldn't stay in their place, or have the means to not care what their place was, or had reached a certain age where they no longer cared what their place was, right? They became widows and they never remarried, right? What to do with a woman unmarried in that culture, right? And make no mistake, the powers that be in the United States want that back, right? They want that back. It may look different, but the question of what to do with a single woman, right? That they're if you don't have any, you don't have to worry about it because they're under the rule of the patriarch of the house, right? Um, so what I'm doing here is spiritual, political, personal, right? And it's threatening. It's threatening to
Mm.
individual women. It's threatening to men. It's threatening to patriarchy. Um, and that means that it's powerful, right? And it's so interesting to me, having back in 1992 um taken my first women's studies class, right? When it was like a new thing in the world to even have a women's studies department, right? And I was too radical for the women's studies department because I wanted to talk about women's spirituality, and they weren't ready for those conversations. And so I had to go outside the department to have other kinds of professors help me to oversee my thesis work. And a professor said, well, do you want a degree from the women's studies department? And I said, well, I'm like, I finished all the requirements and blah, 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 blah. She said, "You're so mad at them now." And so we set up my own self-designed major and called it Women's Spirituality and Power, which was the intersection between gender, politics, and religion in women's lives across history, right? And so here I am 35 years later, right? And that is all coming together again, right? All coming through me again in this project, the Crone herself. Yeah.
A true hag
A
in
true hag.
every sense of the word. Let's talk about that one. I am personally a big fan of Sharon Blackie, Haggitude,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is really shaping our conversation about age and ageism
Mm-hmm.
as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to biological women. What do we need to take forward?
In regards to,
In regards to the conversation, you say that they weren't ready for women's spirituality in 1992, and I believe you.
mhm.
I
Yes,
grew
there
up
was
in
the
the
feminist
90s.
movement and there was like the goddess movement, who were feminists who were doing goddess spirituality, right? And unfortunately, so many of those women did not continue to evolve in their ideas about gender, right?
That's really important
Really
because
important.
the Dianic movement is right. Like, as a woman, I want to be represented by gods that resemble me.
Hmm.
And if I cling so tightly to the archetype of womanhood, then I miss so many people and experiences and things in my life
Hmm.
because I am too structurally bound to a convention. The idea is to change things. So, what are we bringing forward with us?
I would hope that we're bringing forward a sense of our own value, right? That that comes from within us. That is not that we are no longer looking outside of us for our value, for affirmation that we are worth something, that we are valuable because we are, right? That's huge. That's liberation, right? That is liberty embodied, right? Is to say, I have value and worth simply because I'm here, not because of something I earned, something, some valuation that was placed upon me because I'm beautiful or tall or thin, or some valuation placed upon me because I know when to be quiet and shrink and acquiesce and be accommodating, right? I want us to be free, right? I want us to be free. I want all of us, women, men, all humans, I want us free from the internalized oppressions that we are subjected to and that we internalize so deeply that we don't even know we're doing it. One of the ways that is both difficult, right, for people who work with me, and incredibly freeing is that I will stop people in the middle of a sentence where they're saying, well, maybe I should have, maybe I need to make, and they're talking about fixing themselves or repairing themselves, or all of this work that we have to do on ourselves to be whole, to be worth, to feel like we're worthy, to feel like we're good, right? And I ride people on how the way that they talk about themselves reinforces the external oppression and reinforces our lack of value for ourselves. So when you say where do we want to go forward? We want to be free. I believe that we humans are on the cusp or in the midst of a huge evolutionary transformation. The fact that we can even name that we are in the middle of a evolutionary transformation, that we understand we are evolving and that we are consciously trying to evolve so we don't destroy ourselves and the planet at the very least, right? So that we don't destroy ourselves and the planet. But because we want to be better, we are trying to be more human and more humane, right? So I believe that we are in this evolutionary process. But as long as we're chained by our internalized oppressions and the external oppressions, which, they're clamping down, right? Trying to get us back in the box where they want us, right? As long as we're chained there, we can't get to the next place. And I'm very invested, even though I work with ancestral and ancient and archetypal forces. My eyes are on the future for my descendants, for our descendants. I don't want them to spend their lives thinking, and not only do I have my own work to do, I got to go work on healing all of my ancestors. I want us to heal ourselves, right? When we heal our ancestors. We don't have to make that a project. When we heal, when we become whole, when we remember who we are, they are healed. And so are our descendants. And if you really want to get timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, right? Our descendants are praying for our healing.
Ooh, I really like that. So, in the spirit of balance,
Mm,
let's talk about the men's for a second.
okay.
One of my favorite pieces of commentary about International Women's Day is that it is when most people search for International Men's Day. Google clearly indicates that more people are researching International Men's Day in March than they are in October when
Sure. Why don't we
International
have White People's
Men's
Month after all?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
That's that, and I think that women are so regularly expected to bring them along, kicking and screaming. However, I do think that a lot of this healing requires partnership, requires them to be willing collaborators. So, how do we reach that place of collaboration rather than whatever the fuck we got going on right now?
I do see it in the younger generation. Some, and I see some of the younger generation going radically farther right than I can ever remember,
That's correct.
right? I it's not that I don't work with men. I have worked with men in other trainings, in other areas of expertise that I have. Um, I don't know how to bring them along. I don't think it's our job to
No, it
bring
truly
them
is not.
along any more than it's Black people's job to bring white people along, right? At some point, it's just like the question that I pose to, my sisters who are contemplating divorce, in their late 40s. At some point, they are either going to get it or they're not, right? Either they're going to realize, like, I'm miserable. The messaging I got was limiting, right? I don't want to be this person who can't have feelings, who has to, like, keep everything together for everyone around me and, like, be the strong backbone of
What is that
family.
meme? The greatest lie ever sold was that women are the more emotional sex because we've rebranded anger as not an emotion.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Men are righteous. Women are hysterical. Yeah. So it's not my wheelhouse, right? I don't know how to help men because I don't have their life experience. I've been adjacent to them, right? There have been times in my life where I've needed them. There have been many more times in my life when I just didn't. I've always been, better off as a spinster. Um, I don't know from the inside what their messaging is or how that lives in their body. But I do know that about women because I am one. It's my lived experience. You know, do I have academic research on this? Yes. Have I done years of spiritual practice on these things? Yes. But I also have the lived experience that I have, through abusive relationships and narcissistic husbands and raising children on my own. And um, I don't know how I'm not the one. I have a friend
You
who will say,
can't
I'm
blame
not
me
the
for
one for that.
asking. You
Yeah.
can't blame me for asking. No,
No, I
truly,
can't. And I
I.
wish I had an answer. And I wish
Mhm.
I wish I even knew male teachers that I trusted,
That
right?
was actually going to be my next
To
question.
keep
So
to keep the
foiled there.
Yeah, to keep the focus on their issues rather than oftentimes what happens is men's groups get together and they become incels, right? I'm watching this happen in the pagan community left and right. And it's not just the heathens, right? It's not just those um it's left and right.
No,
And
but
the
truly,
silencing of women because men feel oppressed. And it's like men are oppressed, but in a totally different way, right?
yeah,
Totally
the
different messaging.
patriarchy harms everyone.
Yes.
And and it's been it's been really interesting being a member of the pagan community, especially these last 3.5 years,
Mhm.
right? I have watched a beloved community really kind of tear itself apart from the inside with conspiracy theories and far truly far right propaganda where it has no place belonging. And I have felt very powerless to speak to any of this
Right.
division because it's not our job.
It's not our job, and if you've gone down that road, right? Um, there's a mob mentality, right? So if you speak against some of these figures, you're going to be doxxed, right? I know women who have been threatened with rape, right? who have said, I'm sending people to your house to rape you. This is in the pagan community, right? Um, uh, 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 there are men's groups who have taken the story of, the creation of God, of the goddess, right? And just sort of removed her. And I'm like, wow, it's like it's the patriarchal takeover all over again.
All over again, and I can do
It's
nothing but watch it
astounding to
happen.
watch.
Right.
Yeah. And again, like you, and I'm someone who had a rather prominent voice in those communities for many years, and I just backed off and backed off and backed away and watched, and there's nothing to be done. And what I tell students of mine who are studying those kinds of things with me is, you can't change people, right? All we can do is our own work. All we can do is our own practice. All we can do is um, stay attuned and aligned with nature and with ourselves in the best ways that we know how, right? Um, I no longer have life force to give, right? To going to battle with a community that doesn't want, they don't care. They don't want my voice. They don't care about my opinion. And that's okay.
And when you run out of fucks to give for this,
Yeah.
when you prioritize your own life and your own voice against that kind of noise,
Hmm.
there's a real power in it. So I want to wrap up bringing us back to spinsters.
Yeah.
Let's talk about money and the craft, because this isn't right. This is an
Woo.
this is an old way of, truly, I feel, largely repressing people who are coded as women,
Yes.
because we are largely the spiritual life beat, the spiritual life force of the people. And to take away any ability to make money off of our work and our teachings is just another form of oppression.
Indeed. Indeed. There was a time, I don't want to go into the whole story because it's too long and convoluted and complicated. But there was a time when I was being attacked for, being a whore, selling the craft for money. And this thing was sort of spiraling out of control, and my elders and my peers were being like, do not respond, do not respond. And I was like clawing at the walls, right? Not defending myself. It'll blow over, don't respond. And it was very interesting to me because it was a man who came in and said, listen, this is the solo parent of 2 children, right? I know for a fact that she gets food stamps. They're on, government health care. They're getting government benefits. And this is who you're choosing to attack because she dares to try to earn an income to uplift herself and her children through the thing that she is a master at. And you would dare to try to destroy her reputation because she chooses to get paid for her time, her expertise, her brilliant mind, and I was like, he got it. He got it. Not only did he get it, because he was a man,
They actually listened to him.
they listened, right? And he, Rid Wildermuth, thank you for that. time that you stood up and defended me and all women really who are priestesses in the craft. It's okay for men to make money in the craft. It's not okay for us. We're supposed to still give it away, or charge so little that we cannot make ends meet, right? So yes, it is the overculture patriarchy, but it is also the internalized patriarchy. And how dare she? And who does she think she is? I'm a priestess. I'm an initiate. I'm a master at what I do. You know, where else? Where else? Let me just put this question out there. If we're really going to get controversial and really show you my conspiratorial side, where else does someone who has 35 years expertise in their field get invited to speak at a conference for thousands of people with no airfare, no lodging, no meal stipend, and no pay? And then be told, well, you're a bitch because you won't do this for free. Can you imagine someone from any other profession being
Absolutely not.
It's insane. And and they'll say, well, it's for exposure. And my answer
Honey, I'm
is,
dying of exposure out
listen,
here.
who are you exposing me to? People that you have taught not to pay their teachers. So what good is it for me to do that? I'm going to spend thousands of dollars to provide you with this service, and I'm not going to get paid. Yeah, it's messy. It's been a messy experiment, this paganism thing.
So I would like to then allow you to spend a few minutes inviting folks into the work and
Mhm.
ways that they can pay you.
Thank you. I think that ultimately big crone energy is my stepping into what I'm calling whole life priestess, right? I have the credentials to be a life coach. I have the credentials. I have the credentials. I have the credentials. But there was something in the crone herself where I really needed to go back and reclaim the word priestess, right? And the power of what that is, and to embody that once again, because it's part of my whole self, right? What I'm doing working with women is to say, how can we get you to a place where you are your whole self without reservation, without shame, without apology, without shrinking, without quietening yourself? What does that look like for you? And how can I help you to attain that sense of self assurance so that you can stand in your own power on your 2 feet? One of the words that's common to use for this sense of selfhood these days is the word sovereignty. But I'm very, I understand how it's being used, but I'm a wordsmith. And the word sovereign means the ruler, right? And it
Mm.
doesn't mean the ruler over you, it means the ruler over your subjects. Okay. So if we're all like, I'm sovereign, that means I can do anything I want to everybody else. That doesn't help us. So I'm looking for spaces and creating spaces in which we are sovereign in solidarity with one another, sovereign in collaboration with one another. And this is hard for people. I get asked all the time, how can we be sovereign and have to worry about what other people think? And it's like, well, because we don't live here on the planet
Because we
all
live in a
alone.
fucking society, and
Right,
sometimes that does, in fact, still matter.
right.
Not
So if we're creating culture which is what we're doing, which is what I do, right? If we're creating culture, let's create it where everyone's sovereignty is respected and honored. But the solidarity with the society, with the culture that we're creating, is simultaneously honored, right? We can't just do whatever we want if it hurts other people. We can't. That's not human, right? That's inhumane. So, ways that people can work with me: sign up for the newsletter, sign up for and become a member of the conspiracy. It's going to be a blast, right? One of the things about being a crone is it's a lot of fun, right? Is it hard work? If you need it to be hard work. Or you can
Ooh.
just turn the dial. It can be that easy. Scary, but easy. Doesn't have to be years of I'm doing the hard work, right? So sign up for the newsletter, become a member of the conspiracy. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, the Crone herself. I have a program coming up starting in June called A Provocation of Crones,
Ooh.
because I love the word provocateur, which I made up myself. And what we're doing in that program is it's a 5-part series where we invoke the old crones, the ancient archetypal and ancestral crone mothers and ancient goddesses. And then we evoke big crone energy from within us. And then there's a period of provoking, right? Where we're really saying, but stand up for yourself, but take more space, but I want to hear your voice, right? Then there's 5 weeks, which is an initiatory process, including with ceremonies and tools and all of that. And then there's 5 weeks of integration, so that we don't just go off on this spiritual high, or this high of like, now I'm empowered, right? And destroy, all all will worship me and obey, right? So some integration time for that. And another way to work with me is Big Crone Energy Sessions, which is one-on-one over a period of time. I also do this fun thing called coffee dates with the crone herself. They can be 15, 45, or 90 minutes. And you can just set up a call and be like, I need to talk to the crone. And we'll just do that one-off session. And I also do oracle readings, which are a little different than tarot and the kind of divination that most people are doing out there. It comes with a little more consultation. And the crones come through and they have things to tell you about how you can shift outcomes to your liking. So those are all the ways you can work with me as of right now. But of course, I have this brain, and so more things are coming. Yeah.
And we will leave the link in the show notes and elsewhere. But where is that?
That is at thecroneherself.com.
Fabulous.
Thank
Karina,
you so much, Briar.
this has been so much fun. I'm so glad you could be here today. Y'all, this is what we're building here. This is the whole point of the Neurodiversity Media Network, is to allow us to come together and have these big, expansive conversations with people who are not necessarily out there being the big stuff, because that's not always who has the best information. If you would like to know more about our mission, you can find it at neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. Subscribers get a bunch of private streams and access to all of our course pages. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. Karina, we'll do it again. I think we could probably do a whole bunch more of these. So
We could stay up all night and have a slumber party. Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. I'm here. We're signing it up. It's a slumber party. All right. Thanks, y'all. Have a
Take
great one.
care.